My wife disappeared for one night. No call, no message, nothing. At 3:17 a.m., I finally heard the front door open. She walked inside like nothing had happened. I asked her where she'd been. She gave me an answer, and I almost believed her. The next morning, I found a hotel receipt inside her coat. 1 room, 1 night. A hotel nearly 2 hours from our home. I thought I finally had proof that my wife was cheating, so I called the hotel. The receptionist checked the records, then said something that made my stomach drop. "Your wife wasn't the guest." I asked, "Then why was she there?" There was a long silence. Then she answered, she was looking for someone. Someone named Daniel. A man my wife had never mentioned. A man she claimed had been dead for 12 years. And that's when I realized I wasn't investigating an affair. I was uncovering a secret my wife had been hiding long before she met me. That night, my wife told me she would only be gone for a little while. Nothing seemed unusual. She put on her black coat, picked up her small bag, and said, "I might be home late." I simply nodded. I didn't ask where she was going. After years of marriage, I still trusted her. But by 11 p.m., she wasn't home. I sent her a message, no reply. I called her, nothing. By 12:30 a.m., I started feeling uneasy. At 1:15 a.m., her phone was still unreachable. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe her battery had died. Maybe something had happened. Maybe she simply needed some time alone. But as the hours passed, those explanations became harder to believe. I sat alone in the living room. The lights were still on. The chair across from me was empty. And every few minutes I looked at the clock. 2:47 a.m. Still nothing. Then, 3:17 a.m., I heard a car stop outside our house. I immediately stood up. A few seconds later, the front door opened. My wife walked inside. She looked exhausted. Her coat was slightly wet, and there was something different about her face. I asked, "Where were you?" She paused, then quietly answered, "I just needed some time to think." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as she walked past me toward the bedroom, I noticed something. The bag she had taken with her was gone. I looked at the door, then back at her, and for the first time that night, I asked myself, what was she really doing out there? The next morning, I barely slept. My wife acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee. She answered a few messages, and when I asked about the night before, she simply said, "I already told you. I needed some time alone." I wanted to let it go, but something kept bothering me. Then, while she was getting ready for work, she left her coat on the bedroom chair. I picked it up to hang in the closet, and that's when I felt something inside the pocket. A small piece of paper. I pulled it out. At first I thought it was nothing, just an ordinary receipt. Then I looked closer. It was from a hotel almost 2 hours away from our home. 1 room, 1 night, and the date was the exact night she disappeared. My heart started pounding. I looked at the name printed on the receipt. It wasn't my wife's name. It wasn't even a name I recognized. For a few seconds, I just stood there holding it. I could have confronted her immediately. I could have walked into the kitchen and demanded an explanation. But I didn't, because suddenly another thought entered my mind. What if this wasn't an affair? What if the receipt was connected to something much bigger? I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. Then I heard footsteps behind me. My wife was standing in the doorway. She looked at the receipt in my hand. Her face went completely pale. She didn't ask what I had found. She didn't ask where I got it. She simply stared at me and whispered, "You weren't supposed to find that." And in that moment, I knew the night before wasn't the real secret. The real secret had started years ago. I couldn't stop thinking about what my wife had said. You weren't supposed to find that. That sentence stayed with me all morning. If the receipt meant nothing, why was she afraid of me finding it? So while she was at work, I took the receipt from my pocket and called the hotel. My hands were sweating as I dialed the number. A woman answered. I gave her the date printed on the receipt and asked if she could confirm whether my wife had stayed there that night. There was a pause. Then I heard her typing. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry, sir, your wife wasn't the guest." I felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion. Then I asked, "Then why was she there?" Another pause. This one lasted longer. The receptionist lowered her voice. She came to the front desk asking about someone. My heart started beating faster. Who? The woman checked the record again. Then she gave me a name. Daniel Carter. I wrote the name down. Daniel Carter. I had never heard it before. I asked what my wife had wanted. The receptionist hesitated, then said she asked if he had checked in. My stomach tightened. I asked whether Daniel had actually stayed at the hotel. The answer came almost immediately. Yes. 1 room, 1 night. The same night my wife disappeared. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I searched the name online. At first, I found nothing that made sense. Then I found an old photograph. A younger version of my wife was standing beside a man. I stared at the screen. It was Daniel. And underneath the photograph was a date from 12 years earlier. I kept scrolling. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. Daniel Carter had been reported dead 12 years earlier. I looked at the photograph again, then at the hotel receipt. My wife had gone 2 hours away to find a man who was supposedly dead. And suddenly, the question wasn't, was my wife cheating on me? It was, why was my wife looking for a dead man? I stared at the old photograph for what felt like an hour. There was no mistake. The woman standing beside Daniel was my wife. But she looked different, younger, happier, and completely unfamiliar to me. I kept asking myself the same question. Why had she never told me about him? I searched for everything I could find about Daniel Carter. Old articles, public records, archived photographs. Most of them were from more than a decade ago. Then I found something that made me stop breathing. Daniel wasn't just someone from my wife's past. He had been connected to her family. According to an old article, Daniel had disappeared shortly before his reported death. But there was something strange about the timeline. The dates didn't match. The official story said Daniel had died 12 years ago.
yet there were records suggesting someone had seen him years later. I printed everything I found and spread the documents across my desk. Then I noticed something in the old photograph. Behind my wife and Daniel was a building, an old house. I recognized it immediately. It was the same house my wife had once told me belonged to her grandmother. I had been there only once years ago. She had always avoided talking about that place. Now I understood why. I searched through an old family album we kept in the attic. After several minutes, I found another photograph. Same house, same yard, but this time there was another person standing in the background. Me. I froze. I had no memory of ever being there. I turned the photograph over. On the back was a handwritten date. It was from 12 years ago, the same year Daniel supposedly died. Then I heard the front door open downstairs. My wife was home. I quickly gathered the photographs, but before I could put them away, she appeared at the doorway. She looked at the photograph in my hand, her eyes filled with tears. Then she whispered, "You finally found it." I stared at her. Found what? She took a slow breath and said something I never expected. "The reason you don't remember Daniel," she paused, "is because you were there when he disappeared." And suddenly I realized this wasn't just her secret, it was mine too. My wife sat across from me in silence. For the first time since I had known her, she looked afraid of what I might discover. I placed the old photograph on the table. Then I placed the hotel receipt beside it. Finally, I looked directly at her. "Who is Daniel?" She closed her eyes. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Daniel was supposed to be dead." I felt a chill run through me. She explained that 12 years ago, Daniel had disappeared after discovering something dangerous about her family. He had asked her to keep quiet. He told her that if anyone found out what he knew, someone could get hurt. Then, one night, Daniel vanished. Everyone assumed he was dead. But my wife had never completely believed it. A few weeks earlier, she had received an anonymous message. Someone claimed Daniel was still alive, and they gave her one location, the hotel. That's why she disappeared that night. She wasn't meeting another man. She was trying to find someone she believed was dead. But there was one part of her story that I couldn't understand. I pointed at the old photograph. Why am I in this picture? My wife's eyes filled with tears. She finally told me the part she had been too afraid to say. 12 years ago, I had met Daniel. I had helped him that night. But after an accident, I suffered a head injury. I lost parts of my memory. My wife had been there when it happened. She chose not to tell me everything. She thought she was protecting me, but there was something even worse. Daniel hadn't disappeared because he was running from my wife. He had disappeared because someone was trying to find him. And according to the message my wife received, that person had started looking again. I stared at her. "So all these years?" She nodded. "I've been trying to protect you." I wanted to believe her, but then my phone vibrated. A new message appeared from an unknown number. Only one sentence. "Now you remember enough." I looked at my wife. She looked at me. And suddenly I understood. The hotel receipt wasn't the beginning of the secret. It was a warning. Someone wanted us to find the truth, and now that we had, there was no way to hide from it anymore.
When suspicion becomes the truth you want to believe. Sometimes we find one small piece of evidence and our mind immediately creates the rest of the story. A hotel receipt, a missed call, a night without an explanation, a name we've never heard before, and suddenly we believe we already know the truth. But suspicion can be dangerous because it makes us look for evidence that supports what we already fear. In this story, the hotel receipt looked like proof of an affair, but the truth was far more complicated. His wife wasn't meeting another man. She was searching for someone from her past, someone she believed had been dead for 12 years. And beneath that secret was another truth. She had been hiding part of his own past from him. So the real question isn't only, did she lie? It's, can you forgive someone who lied because they believed they were protecting you? Trust isn't destroyed only by betrayal. Sometimes it's damaged by secrets, fear, and the decision to protect someone without giving them the right to know the truth. And once trust is broken, love alone may not be enough to rebuild it.
The truth wasn't what he thought. For years, I believed trust meant knowing everything about the person you loved. Now I understand, sometimes people keep secrets because they're afraid of losing you. My wife lied to me. She hid Daniel. She hid the truth about that night, and she even hid part of my own past from me. But there was one question I couldn't stop asking. Was she protecting me or protecting herself? I don't know if our marriage will ever be the same again. Maybe some truths are too painful to forget. Maybe some lies are too deep to forgive. But one thing is certain. Trust doesn't disappear in a single moment. Sometimes it disappears one secret at a time. What would you do if your partner hid a life-changing secret from you for years because they claimed they were protecting you? A, I would forgive them. B, I could never trust them again. C, I'd need time to decide. Comment A, B, or C and tell us why. Your answer might help someone who is facing the same choice. Like if this story made you question what trust really means. Share this story with someone who would have a different answer. Subscribe to Tribal Survival Feast for the next emotional mystery. Because sometimes the hardest truth isn't what someone did to you. It's discovering why they believed you couldn't handle the truth.